This is John Davidson, and I'd like to talk with you about the coaching experience that I have when I am going into a coaching call. They're conversations where the participants, they don't see each other. So we cut off our visual senses when we come to the conversation. What I find by doing that is that the conversation gets super central. So the participants, the coaching client and the coach, are actually allured away from the distractions of their own seeing, of their own sight. Because when we see something, when it's visual, we tend to just activate the mind. And yet when we are cut off from our visual senses and we hear things just in sound, it enters us in a different way. So the content that is emerging, the content that is composing in the center of a conversation is connected to in forward and backward ways, meaning that what's coming out and what's going in are very connected to the entire body, the heart, that we as we are made, we are able to perceive, we're able to take in and speak from different organs of perception that we have. So my intention of the coaching call is to not try to force or manipulate the content, the information, but really respect the incoming information, the unfolding of information that's not quite embodied yet. Now, to someone listening to this, they might find this a little odd or esoteric, and it's obvious because it's not something that you can get until you experience it, but maybe I can give you some examples. Have you ever watched a jazz trio play a song and then improvise? Have you ever seen them jam where they get off script and they start to go into domains, they start to navigate almost in a way where the song is sort of having them lose their own individuality but yet find it at the same time, because what they're bringing to the moment, they are being informed by what the moment kind of wants. You know, there's a visceral quality to what is being played, and by virtue of everyone being dedicated and surrendering, every next moment is hanging on an interdependence between the jazz group. So what one does is going to be organizing the playing of the other, and then as that person plays, then there's a generosity or giving to the way that the other interdependently plays. And there's a beautiful syncing up quality that the way the one is listening from, like a wholeness that is being co-created, a collective wholeness, each one is becoming deeply connected, and the way that they play, the toning, the style, the intensity, the direction is nurtured and is born by something that is collectively intelligent. And if you've played in a band, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know where this sort of trust happens, where you're inheriting something from the whole as opposed to just contributing something from your own personal organizing. You're kind of being organized by a wider periphery, almost like it's like a collective field that is somehow taking over or overriding the individual components, and that each person in the field is somehow mysteriously informed by emerging information that's coming out of the space, and each player is actively organizing their efforts. And of course, us, the listener, you know, we hear it as an outsider, and we say, oh, how does that get done? Or where does that come from? Or how do they get to this? How do they arrive? And it almost seems like the song, as the song is being played, the song is actually being known. There's a surprise at every moment, that the beginning and the entry into the song is almost like jumping in but there's no outcome. There's no sense of where it's all going. It's sort of unfolding and finding its own way through as this sort of loyalty and dedication is happening. And the only way to bring it out is to integrate a number of different parts. I mean, even the audience in the room and them participating and offering the listening that they're offering, and then the players, and they're almost like vessels. They're like they're truly the instruments, and that they breathe air into what they're playing, and they animate what they're playing. And so it comes out in a unique sort of expression that incorporates the collective activity and the collective ingredients that are just composed by that moment, that are departing from any regularity or anything fixed. It is non-fixed, and it is totally localized by all of these collective ingredients that are all incorporated into what's produced. And it's that integration of the room, the space, the people, the vibe, the frequency, the players, it's all there in a felt sense. You know, and I guess as a player, when you start to play from there, when you begin to kind of play from the macro rather than the micro might mean you play from inside yourself, but when you really incorporate more of the space itself and all the different energy and information flows that are out there and coming in, it's interesting. You know, you wonder where the internal to out is and where the external to in is, and they almost seem like they're both sort of moving in a parallel way, that what's coming in is going out and what's going out is coming in, and it's just all connected. As I say these things to you, it's even hard to put this into language when really the head doesn't really get this, but we're almost like radio antennas that are receiving transmissions, and then we're transforming those transmissions outwardly into composition, and then as we play composition, the composition is then interdependently fed by what's happening outside. And there's this direct connection that's so aligned and so congruent that we actually hit or tap into something that we know is there, but it's hard to describe. And you know when you're there because you can feel it. You know, you can feel it in your hands. You can feel it down deep in the center of mass of your body. And then from there, it's reproduced. I look at it almost like connecting with a light, and then you kind of turn it inside around and you bend it back out. And so everything that's active is actually at the same level of everything that's receptive. You know, what's coming and going is equally intense. And there's a dance that's happening where the attention to that moment is somehow crafting or participating in the intention like a grounding space. Well, this is a lot to say, but really this is what cooks up the motion, the energy, the components that are possible in a dialogue. And a dia, which means two, dia, or die, which is two, and then logos, which is meaning or through the word, it means two in the flow. Now to assist this flow, where new flow patterns of energy and information can enter, you know, it requires some preparation. It requires a willingness. And one of those is that everything you know, everything you think you know, is set aside. So the first place to start a coaching process is everybody's willing to be wrong. Everybody's willing and comfortable with their own ignorance. And when you operate from there, you inspire a natural curiosity, a wonder, and you open up a way for receiving input. And this is the open mind. And once you get that, you notice that something else is more available. You actually start to open up another capacity to really sense and integrate what the other is experiencing and feeling. You actually feel what they feel. There's a feel for it. And then all together, after this sort of feeling state, you drop into a state where there really is no you and the other. There's just one. And it's all coming and it's emerging at the moment that it's being played. It's being created by surprise as it's moving and coming and going. And that's kind of what it feels like in the moments where there's questions that are emerging in a coaching session, where the only questions, the origins of those questions, is validated and verified through the process of interaction, through the suspension and being able to sense the felt sense of what's actually happening and leaning in until that enters and staying there. It takes practice, because our natural inclination when we have these kind of moments where it's silent is to fill it up with things that we are knowing, and there's a slight discomfort because we think that in order for things to become valuable or in order for something to happen, we have to occupy, we have to force, we have to manipulate, we have to get in there. And it's almost like a seller having to impose what they're presenting. It's like they have to talk and they have to say things. But really what's happening is they're just covering up the silence because we've gotten uncomfortable with the silent spaces. We've undervalued silence. And it's so sweet and it's so formative that really the spaces that are quiet after a question are some of the most evocative and helpful moments. Almost like a wave of information is knocking on the door to come in. And then if we wait long enough and we kind of hang in the gray, that information is going to have a chance to kind of penetrate our membrane in the conversation. That wholeness is sort of outside and it's animated and there's something living in it. And all we have to do is release and understand that there's a third party always in the session. Now again, as you're hearing this may sound a little mystical or creepy because, on the surface, you might think it has to be mechanical. There's a helping process here. There's a person that knows something, there's somebody that doesn't. But that's not what forms this opening. That's not what nurtures this field. Because remember, there is no expertise. There is no I know answers and you don't. That the answers are collectively, innocently denied. We don't have them yet. And so we have to construct a way of relating such that the answers, we become enlightened together. So the role of the coach within this scope is not to be telling anybody to do anything. And it's not to be giving any answers. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's not to have any. Now, this probably is really hard to get when people are marketing coaching and expertise based on something I really know and I'm getting a niche and you should trust me and this is what I'm selling. And so really it's hard because a person has never really understood a coaching relationship until it's done, until it's experienced. It's like not knowing what a band or what a group can really do until they actually play together. The real interview, the real prediction of possibilities happens through the process of doing it. So it's hard to evaluate. It's very hard to predict. It's hard to really know what you need when you're evaluating help because the help happens through the process of just this. It's unfolding right as it is. And so it's a demonstration. It's the process of feeling it and seeing if it works and seeing if it comes up and seeing if it's there. And if it is, then we can hit it. So it's kind of like taking the keys to the car and going away for the weekend. You don't really know what the car and the relationship to it's like and what the car can do until you get on it. It's like riding a horse. You don't really know what the horse needs until you get on the horse and actually ride it. So it's a little like ready, fire, aim. But more than that, this is more of just an overall term with life itself, isn't it? That the way the life that we have is experienced is that we don't really know what's coming. And so we ask ourselves to release what it is that we remember, what it is that we know, what it is we're full with, such that we're able to receive things that we don't necessarily know we need yet. There's an invisible type of help. And this is what the coach has the will and the fearlessness and the courage to open up, to step aside, and to allow these precipitating elements, these flow patterns of energy and information to come from a space outside that can't really be tapped until there's a formative structure, there's an atmosphere of trust, there's legitimacy, and there's acceptance. And with that being said, there's the capacity to really inquire together and to reflect together and to co-initiate something where we're kind of telling how it is, but we're not quite sure where it's really going. But as we're telling it, we're bringing it into life. So to really pre-sense something, an emerging future possibility that's waiting to happen, there's this sort of how we put it together. In the same way that great teams create great breakthroughs and come up with different responses and innovate. And they inherit something and they're revealed something as they go into these depths, like a deep dive journey. You dive down into the unknown and you get there and you retreat and you reflect and you observe. And instead of having to come up with, well, here's what we're going to do, or hey, I know what we got to do with this. That's the easy way, is to say, here's what seems to be becoming clear. And as we talk about it more and we allow each other to kind of be echolocators for each other, where I'm saying one thing and then that ping-pongs back to the other, and then they see one thing and then I see one thing and then we see one thing. And through that process of sort of seeing the puzzle's pieces kind of get put together, and then we start to notice that there's something there. It begins to crystallize, and then we begin to kind of get a hold of it, and it sort of reveals itself into movement. But it starts sometimes just through the process of reflecting on the truth of what's going on. We start with kind of the current narrative of what's happening, and then that narrative sort of builds on itself. And it's a beautiful thing, like a midwife, to kind of see something coming into being, but it's not forced, and it's not acted upon out of fear, and it's not acted upon out of any positioning or in presenting oneself, but it's completely focused away into something that's wanting to happen, almost like a seed that tendrils from a little speck, and then it starts to build out a branch, and then a branch, a leaf, and then a leaf into another leaf, and then another branch, and then you're building out an entire formative structure. I'm always blown away as to how that expansionistic process works in music, and I'm also blown away as to how the conversation is the hotbed, is the place from which these creations come. I don't know how it happens, and I don't try to know how it happens. It's like turning on a light switch. But I'm always intrigued and fascinated with how it happens, and that no coaching session is ever the same. And as much as I expect things to go the same, they never do, because there's too many unique ingredients. It's almost like a chef who's throwing all the ingredients on the table, and then the food and the formula and the recipe starts to really speak to you. It's working more instinctively from the hand and the heart rather than the head, and kind of sensing and then bringing it out a little bit more, and then kind of sensing, and let's try this and let's try that, until there's something that is agreeable and something that has enough mass to where it's looking for a place to go, and then you just simply release it. I can't tell you how often I experience this on a daily basis in these coaching sessions, where I think conversations have animation, they have life within them, and that the teacher is really in the center of the conversation. The teacher isn't me. And that the student isn't even the student. They already have access to these answers. We're just opening the space, and we're willing to go for it. And then through that, we let the session happen organically and let it unfold. And every time I ask what was valuable about the session, it was never expected, it was never planned. And the place where the session wants to go, the flow of the session and the arrival of that session, is always something that is perfectly made, is so closely resonant to what it is that I was needing to get through and what the person was needing to get help with. I call this invisible help. It's almost like the universe has this little helper that's always staying there, and it hasn't quite made itself cleanly clear yet. But if we continue to sort of dabble in it, fiddle with it, access it, if we continue to reflect on it, it becomes totally clear, penetratingly clear. It becomes essential. And I don't know how that happens, but I know there's something in it in terms of value creation when someone's in a helping process. And I believe this can happen in the selling type environment, in the health and human services environment. This can happen when two people get together and they are somehow, in a spooky way, in a mysterious way, bound by something that is about to become true. And you find that your place, the dots are connected as you begin to sense that that's coming. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. It was unexpected perfection that starts to reveal itself. It's not mechanical. It's organic. It's orientational. We're oriented towards something that if we deepen our attention to it, our attention actually is collectively generative. And then what becomes true on the other side, once we cross into what's ready to be done, then that doing becomes obvious. The role becomes obvious. The action, the mobilization becomes obvious. But this process is something I have to talk about because it is conversation animation. And it comes out of nothing. It comes out of nowhere. And it starts with this surrender and willingness and redirection back to the center, just like the music. Just like the music is created. It's not on ourselves. We're focused on the collective happenings, the music that's ready to be played, the music that's ready to play us, the information that's ready to inform us, to reflect as mirrors, and almost like biosonar, like a dolphin would do. We echolocate, boom, 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 back and forth, until it starts to kind of knit its own way. It starts to connectively find the connective tissue in what the conversation is ready to produce. And all I have to do as the midwife is to say, I'm getting out of its way. There's something big coming, and I can sense what it is. And if we start describing it, it's like an iceberg. We'll see the top, and then we start to deepen what's below, and it starts to reveal itself. To be together in allowing that process takes a great deal of courage and connection. It takes a great deal of compassion to really let the other be let out and to trust that this is exactly what is coming, what is needed. I find that so many neat innovations have come out this way. New ideas and new nuances, new pieces of intellectual capital, new ways of looking at things, new responses. Something new is ready to emerge while something is ready to end. And we trust that sentiment. We trust that movement, that creative movement of giving and receiving and giving. It's that interesting creative movement and pattern of order of something gathering and something allowing to be gathered, something coming in while something is going out, something contracting while something is settling. There's a creative order of movement and energy that you become sensitive to as you co-create this space. So the word communicate is like fornicate. It is like conversation intercourse, where there's two people giving one thing, and there's a participation into kind of knowing your place and knowing what to do by going to the center of it. And then you become an informed being. You kind of sense what's taking you over. And then you walk more into it. And the more you walk, the more you see the path. And the more you see the path, the more you're able to courageously walk. But you stay open, and you speak from it, and you sense it, and you try to language it, and it verifies and validates itself through this process of relating. This relating of patterns of order between us are creating a property of something that is becoming true. So I appreciate you taking this moment of reflection with me to talk about what's so real for me in this conversation, this communication animation that happens between people, between a real group of people that can trust one another, that can find this connective tissue that was neither nor them or me, but was something in the world of we, that was only able to become real through us. And that is an amazing space to live from. That is an amazing space to see creations come out of nothing. It's a great way to locate what the future is summoning and ready to bring into reality. Thank you very much. If you'd like more information about conversation animation, or you'd like to experience conversation animation yourself, look us up online at High Level Performance. I am JD, the VIP coach. You can call us for service or sales at 714-375-6624. We're online at highlevelperformance.com, or just email me if you have any questions or inquiries and you'd like some help. VIP coach at highlevelperformance.com. VIP coach at highlevelperformance.com. Thank you.